I'd like to call the meeting to order. We can stand and say the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody, for coming. We have no written communication, but we do have some visitors wishing to speak that signed in, made an appointment, so they get 5 minutes.
Okay.
So welcome, Amherst alumni.
Hi, thank you very much for your time this evening. I'm Marilyn Roll, and I'm one of the co-presidents of the Amherst Alumni Foundation. First of all, thank you for the great relationship we have with you guys in the school district. It's wonderful things we're doing. And tonight we have a very exciting announcement to make for you on behalf of the foundation. And I'd like to introduce Nicole Phillips, and she is our other co-president. Co-chair-president, yeah. And our treasurer, Sue Fretz, is here tonight. And I'm going to turn the program over to Ann Joyce, who is going to give all the details.
Okay, thanks, Marilyn. Thanks for having us here tonight. It's been a long time since I've been here, and I don't remember things as well as I used to, so I have to read, so excuse me for that. I am Ann Harding Joyce, class of 1970. My grandchildren are fourth generation students in the Amherst School District, so our history goes way back. The Alumni Foundation wanted to personally and publicly acknowledge the generous gift bequeathed to the foundation by Donald R. Dimp Wagner, Amherst High School class of 1948, and to let you know how we intend to fulfill his trust in us. That we will be professional, thoughtful, diligent, and fiscally responsible in our administration of his legacy. Dimp's $604,000 gift, along with $200,000 from the Alumni Foundation's existing investment account, has been placed in a private foundation within the Community Foundation of Greater Buffalo. The Community Foundation has a 100-year record of institutional excellence and adherence to best practices as defined by New York State not-for-profit law. With assets of more than $500 million, the Community Foundation is the caretaker for more than 100 local funds, individuals, not-for-profit organizations, and foundations throughout Western New York. Through its partnership with Colonial Consulting, a diversified, globally recognized investing firm that specializes in not-for-profit clients, and with more than $36 billion in assets, the Community Foundation has a track record of sustained investment success. Our hope is that within the next few years, our fund will grow to the level where we are able to gift through grants and special projects $30,000 to $50,000 per year to the students and faculty of the Amherst Central School District. Dimp loved Amherst, and in his later life, he was thrilled to be able to give back to the place that helped him form his successful life. Our intention is that this incredible gift from Dimp will honor his legacy in perpetuity and help build a culture in our students of appreciation for the amazing opportunities they have been given as students of the Amherst Central School District. And we're always available to talk to you about anything. Yes. So give us a shout if you need us. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
With that, we'll move on to reports of boards and committees. I will start with our annual exercise as we lead into budget development for our exit poll survey results. Nothing new with it. I think you're going to see very consistent over the last 5 years that we've been doing it. While the number of voters have changed, the actual voting percentage of passing our budget has stayed fairly consistent in the 80 percentile range. The number of percentage of respondents seems to have stayed fairly consistent. Last year we had an increase. And I think what's nice to see, I think with this 5-year history as we go into budget development, is everything stays fairly consistent. What the voters' risk tolerance is, tolerance to budget increases potentially, should we have to do those across the board. So know. I always stick this in my folder here, so when we're doing our budget development, we know what kind of the voters have said they're willing to do, not willing to do, so I would just tuck that away for budget development purposes. Does anyone have any questions about it, or?
I like that the district website has gained traction.
It has gained traction, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
because it's gone through a lot of,
it's gone through a lot of
upgrading
changes of
and, yeah.
itself, yeah.
but I'm glad we keep doing it too for consistency and.
Later in the school year, we'll talk about if we want to keep it the same, keep doing it, keep it the same, add any questions, delete any questions, but for now, we just look at where we are.
Interesting, there was a big spike in first year voting.
There wasn't, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. Every other year.
That's usually if there is a race.
Oh, yes, that makes sense.
We didn't have a contested race, did we? this
In
year?
15? you did.
Oh, in 15, yes.
Mhm.
In this past year, 21%, I don't typically vote this first year voting. Yeah, we didn't have this race last year.
Uncontested. That was you and Don. So if everybody's good with that, we can move on to smart schools with Mrs. Ernst.
Yes, I attended the Smart Schools Bond Act meeting led by Mrs. Pazinski on Wednesday, November 6th. The approval is on the agenda tonight. Really, this last meeting was just a formality, as there were no real revelations at the meeting. We had 2 letters submitted from 2 of the non-pubs, but neither was against the proposal. So following this meeting, assuming that the proposal is approved, then it will go on to NICED and the Smart Schools Review Panel, and then we wait. So, and then the other meeting I attended on Saturday, there was an advocacy, sort of an advocacy lesson, courtesy of Erie County Association of School Boards. Started at 8:30 on Saturday morning and finished at 12:15. Basically, the notable things were we lost 2 members of NISBA who were very useful to us as far as advocacy. Julie Marlette and Brianna McNamee have both left for new career challenges. In general, they gave lessons in effective ways to advocate, and we have people on this board who've done it already, so we have a pretty good idea. But there were other people there who hadn't ever done the things that we've done, go meet with their elected officials. So the number 1 was try to have face-to-face contact, get to the point and use data, and then the third thing was follow-up. There was a presentation by Vic Martucci, who's a lobbyist, and then Mike Cornell spoke. He had been invited to a high-level meeting, and the message there was that we, in general, all the school boards should stop asking for the money that we're not getting from the aid formula, because we're not going to get it. That there's an official aid formula, but then there's a way that they actually dole out the money. And basically they have a recognition of high-need districts, and they start with that, and they give to them what they think they need, and then what's left over is distributed amongst everyone else. And then the biggest message from pretty much everyone who spoke was that this is going to be a very, very difficult budget year. And then at the end, there was a panel I was actually on it, didn't know I was going to be on it, but I looked up, my name was on the placard on the table, so I sat on it. But really the most of that discussion was spent discussing the unified basketball program and how successful it's been for the school districts that have it, ourselves included. And there were people wondering, Orchard Park in general, they started the conversation because they have an interest in starting the program there. And then there was a gentleman from Cheektowaga Sloan that asked if there was any information he could see because he didn't understand, necessarily what it was. And I directed him to the pieces that we have on our website. Obviously we have a very talented Scandura that really, that buzzer beater three-pointer will sell anybody on that program anywhere. It's just amazing. And that was it.
Great. Turn it over to the superintendent's report.
Thanks. Tonight we have just one item under the superintendent's report. Sorry, I'm battling a cold. So I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Shanahan to give you a presentation on the Every Student Succeeds Act, which, as you know, was passed at the federal level, and then at the state level, they put together a plan that coincides with the federal law. And this is pretty much the first full year of implementation with this new system of accountability. So I've asked Dr. Shanahan to prepare a brief overview of it and give you some information about where our schools and districts stand in this first year of accountability.
Great. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to share an update as to where we are as a district. And New York State, obviously, we benefit from this because we can leverage significant funds towards our school district and our at-need students or at-risk students. So tonight all I'm going to do is go over 4 different areas. What is Every Student Succeeds Act now that it was officially adopted in January 2018? What is, and I'll revert into ESSA because that's my world right now. So the acronym is there for you, Accountability System. And I'll do that in brief. What are the accountability designations that are new because they're different from the previous ones, and where do we stand? So what is the Every Student Succeeds Act? This is based off of federal law for K-12 education. It outlines the federal money used to support public schools to improve student outcomes that are specifically focused on students who historically underperform according to state averages. And New York State receives approximately $1.6 billion from the federal government for this particular funding source. So the focus of the Every Student Succeeds Act is on equity and educational equity. So it shouldn't matter where a student lives, who they are, where they go to school. Everybody should have access to excellent education. Right. So that's the whole purpose behind the Every Student Succeeds Act. The accountability factor for districts is the data that we get are good pieces of data to let us think about what is it that we're doing really well, what are some things we might need to grow and improve in, and then we're making educational decisions all the time, whether it be resources that we're using, teaching, hiring, co-teaching, different teaching models. What are the implications of those choices and what is the impact? So it's one data point. We'd have to use many, but it allows us to reflect on our practices. So there's 2 parts to that. So Tony alluded to this a little bit. New York State had to establish their own set of indicators. So the federal government gave some guidelines, but basically set the states out to determine what those indicators or measures of school performance would be. New York State had 1,000 people, parents, educators, and national experts that got together and developed this plan over time. The newer plan has a stronger focus on student growth and progress over time, although they do look at the year-to-year progress as well. And they're looking more comprehensively. So they're adding in, and we're not quite to this full implementation yet, but they're adding in things like a climate survey, which wasn't in the previous iteration of the Elementary and Secondary Act. So there's, there are law changes and name changes with Obama in 2015. So there are some new pieces that are going to be layered on in the upcoming years as well, but we're not just looking at the academic, there's also social emotional and looking at culturally responsive teaching, especially for diverse districts like our own. So there are 4 accountability designations. So the comprehensive support and improvement designation, this one is given out every 3 years. It's the lowest performing schools in New York State, and it's the lowest 5%. And it has high school graduation rate below 67% to be in this designation. The next designation, target support and improvement. A school that is designated as target support and improvement can be moved into comprehensive support and improvement if they don't show growth. So why is this important? Because targeted support and improvement is for schools that may have subgroups, subpopulations not achieving. So your school might be good overall, but if you have a particular subgroup that's persistently not showing growth, you can get put into the targeted support and improvement section or designation. So there's two different ways, but the comprehensive support and improvement, if you don't show growth from the TSI, you can be put in the CSI, so they say. The next one is recognition schools. This is in an odd order. You can be a school in good standing, the highest designation, and also be a recognition school if you have a really high performing school. And you're going to see we have a school that falls into that designation. So you'll see that at the end of the presentation. So it's a school that's high performing, or it could be, in the previous system, a school district that was low performing could work and work and work, but it was so hard to get to a recognition point, it was almost defeating. So you could be a recognition school if you made rapid growth and you put a good implementation plan together where student achievement and growth were.
Sorry.
That's all right. No problem. Where the student growth was determined by the commissioner to be a rapid rate of improvement. And so finally, the school in good standing, it means that you're meeting all the threshold indicators, which I'm going to share with you in just a minute. So for all schools, elementary, middle, and high school, the state English language arts tests, math tests, and science tests, scores are all used, as well as the NYSA-SLOD ENL learning progress. So how is that proficiency growing over time while they're being educated in our school district? Also, they've added chronic absenteeism. So if it's a negative, if your chronic absenteeism rate is 10% or higher. So we have to watch, and we're monitoring that. And that is not just with all students, that could fall into a subgroup as well. So we have to watch every subpopulation with this. For high schools, you take everything in column 1, but now you're adding in social studies, graduation rates, and college career and civic readiness as well. And I'll show you a breakdown of that and how that's measured in a minute. 2018-19, they gathered out-of-school suspension data, and that will be rolled in. So the couple, like the climate survey, the out-of-school suspensions, that stuff is being rolled in as we move along in implementation. So those are the measures indicating proficiency for the district. And not to go over is beyond our time today to go how each one of these is calculated, but in general, and I'm going to just move to point, the top 3 are really looking at the students' academic scores over time. So student achievement will just be they calculate something called a composite performance index for just ELA, math, and science. There's a whole calculation behind that for elementary, middle, and high schools. And high schools, they add in social studies. That's just a data point in time. So they're going to give us our 2017-18, 18-19, 19-20. That's it. Then they're going to take that data, and they're going to take 16-17 and 17-18, and they're going to put those together to look at growth over time. So you're going to get the individual data points, then you're going to get the growth over time. Then they have academic progress that the state has set. So as a state, what do we want to look like if ESSA is working? So they have set, in just ELA and math right now, long-term goals for the state, where they want us all to be over time, and then interim progress. So I'm, like, when I'm looking at scores, I'm always looking at, Dan Farley and I are looking at this MIP score. What's our interim progress? So far, we fare very well. We're above the state averages. We're above that trajectory. But we still want to make sure that, you know, we're exceeding that because we have the ability to do that. So, so the academic is looked at in these 3 different ways. And then when you obviously get to high school, you get to your graduation rates of 4-, 5-, and 6-year cohorts. But interestingly, with the graduation rates, they're also asking us to give kids different pathways. So we spent, the strategic plan was so smart even before this came out because it aligns beautifully. We've been looking, we've been working with Tony and we've been working with the middle school and high school about what are different pathways for kids. So one of the things that came out of our strategic plan that was beneficial was to look at different, first of all, if you are college and career ready and you're looking at more advanced courses, which was something that was in our strategic plan. So we've added 4 advanced courses already underway with ESSA. We're fine. We're doing a really nice job there. And then we're also adding something called the Seal of Biliteracy, which the Seal of Biliteracy, we have 6 students this year. Nan Abels and Susan Latch are working. They have 6 students that have committed, and a Seal of Biliteracy, what you have to do to achieve this is you have to be proficient in 2 languages, English and another language, in speaking, reading, and writing and listening. There's an oral auditory component as well. So this college and career readiness, you can get some of these designations by using your strengths, right? We have a nice diversity with your ENL population, our immigrant population. Instead of looking at a deficit model, it becomes a strength. So Nan has been working in developing rubrics, et cetera, to get that moving forward. So the graduation rates, as well as us offering a very rigorous curriculum for our students, come together. And that's where the dovetailing of our strategic plan has been very helpful with what has come out for ESSA as well. English language proficiency, we score very high in that, but the ESSA plan has come out with a new way of measuring it, so it progressively, you have more growth in the beginning if you're at the emerging and entering stages, and then as you get further along, they expect the progression to slow a little bit, which is, it makes sense. So this is now another indicator for our overall proficiency, as well as chronic absenteeism, which we're constantly watching. So there are formulas for all of these beyond tonight's scope, but the nice thing is they're trying to look at our students more comprehensively. And when the climate survey comes in, they'll look at our schools, like what kind of learning environment is this? Like, are we providing safe places for kids? Are we providing climates of warmth and, you know, nurturing their educational achievements? So that will come together. In brief, every once in a while, I may say, all those scores are converted to a 1 to 4. And so when I look at the spreadsheet for the state, I can look at the raw data, but I'm basically looking at, am I a 1, 2, 3, or 4? We want to be 3 or 4 as much as possible to be in good standing. Interesting is that score of 1 to 4 is given for all students in the district and every subgroup, the 9 subgroups, not every, 9 subgroups, and there's the 9 subgroups. So we'll get data on all students, multiracial, Black, African, or African American, American Indian, white, and you can read on down through those designations. So we are scored in all the indicators I just shared with you on all of those subpopulations coming in, which affords us the opportunity to reflect on how are we doing in each subgroup? Are there areas of growth? Are there strengths? We don't want to pull something out if we're doing really well. So what is it that's working? Where do we need to grow and develop a little bit? And it could be we need professional development, you know, to hit a certain area if we see a score changing. It could be we need a different resource. It could be we need to provide supplemental instruction. But we would then do a needs assessment in these subgroup areas, and we would dig a little bit deeper to see what's going on. It just indicates that there's a spot we should be looking at. Participation rate, which is always a sticky conversation for years here, right in Western New York. I remember being in San Antonio, Texas, when that all broke in West Seneca, you know, about the participate or don't participate in the test. So it made it far that year. So 2 consecutive years of 95% participation in ELA or math for each accountability subgroup, not overall, for all of those 9 accountability subgroups. However, there was some pushback on that, and now if you're below 95 but your school shows improvement from year to year, so you're increasing in your participation, then you're fine. They're just watching our participation rates. Everywhere they're watching them. So, in our designation, the good news is we're a school in good standing. Every building is in good standing. Every subgroup is currently in good standing, as well as the district overall. So that's positive news. And on top of that, the cherry on top is our high school was designated. Now remember, this data is always a year behind, right? So 17-18, the high school had a recognition as being a high-performing school, not because they were rapidly improving, but because of their high performance and graduation rates in their subpopulations. So that's where we currently are, good standing, and on top of it, the high school specifically has further recognition. So I'm going back to this slide because we're looking for educational equity through this funding source that we're leveraging through New York State. But we have to then look at that data and figure out what do we do, where we need to improve, and what are the implications of the decisions that we're making. So we have done that. I've worked with the principals around this, and we've talked a little bit. So we are striving to increase our participation. We're under 95%, but we're in good standing because we're showing a continuous steady increase in participation. So we are looking at that. And when I looked at the slide again, I thought, well, it's not that we're trying to hit the 95% mark. It's what we're trying to get a really good picture of what we're doing in the district. And if people aren't taking the assessment, we are only getting part of the picture. So if we can get that as one data point and get a comprehensive data point, then we have a better picture of how our students are doing in all those different subgroups and as a whole. So we're continuing, to work on to reach the 95% mark, as well as. And I'm digging for stuff just so we know. There's no issue here. We are monitoring 3 subgroups, our Black and African American. We have a very tiny, tiny Hispanic population in the middle school that has had some move in and move out. So there's some numbers in there that show. But when we did a deeper analysis of it, there were 11 students one year, 7 the next, and 4 of those 4 of the 7 the following year weren't even the same students. So it's such a small subgroup and population that I'm not concerned at this point, but I think we should watch it as well, especially if that Hispanic population increases. As well as we continue to watch students with disabilities to ensure we meet their needs to maintain a good standing in those particular subpopulations.
Then under previous legislation, there was a minimum number of students required in a subgroup for it to account for the accountability. Is that the same in this one?
Right. So if all the subgroups have to have 30 students in them, if they don't, what they're doing is they're putting 2 years worth together to see if they can get to your 30 that way. So we wouldn't have like a number or a designation. They would take like our 17, 18 if we only had 15 kids in our Hispanic population, or we had 11, and then they would go the next year and look at the next 17, 18, and they look at 18, 19 numbers to see if they can reach 30. We're still below that. So that's why I'm saying we're looking at it, but we're still below the threshold of 30. Something to look at though. Yeah, so with 30, or they combine 2 years together. They didn't say if you don't make it by 30 beyond that point. I would need to look into what occurs there. So it is 30. Question?
So does most or all the data come from the state assessments?
Yeah, except for like we're reporting in chronic absenteeism rates. When they start to do the climate survey, that will come. We can pick our own climate survey. Some pilot districts were piloting a survey. We're kind of waiting to see what the results are from that to see what we're going to do with that information. So they were in process. But I think if you look at the one that might provide some, it's not all state tests. If we go back to the indicators in the college career, like the number of diplomas, the number of advanced courses and credits, so there's probably frequency counts there, right, of like the rigor of what we're offering.
Well, that was going to be my next question. I know that the high school doesn't take the state assessment.
Right. So the high school test will be the ELA, math, science, and it will be social studies are the only state tests that are taken there. And except for our ENL, we'll also take the nicest lot, and we'll get those state test scores and gross scores and will be compared against the academic progress there.
Yeah, Lynn, if you go back one more slide. So we do have Regents exams in the high school for English language arts, math, science, and ENL, and then social studies as well.
Right. But there would be a few other things in there, the college and career readiness besides test scores, right?
And the grad rates.
Graduation rates.
Should we be doing this presentation to the PTAs? I mean, if we're trying to increase participation.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to do that, and it's,
And that is one of the
yeah.
the things that is often, I am trying to pick my word wisely here, often generates a very emotional response from the educators about how the state is trying to hold districts accountable for participation, especially given the amount of, the momentum that the opt-out movement gained at one point, and the number of parents that believe it's their right to choose whether or not their kids participate in the assessment. So I think it is an emotional piece, and I think that's why they backed off a little bit and went to that growth model. So even though you may not be at 95%, if you're trending in the right direction, they're recognizing one of the things, what could happen if we end up not reaching that mark of participation.
Right, all we would have, if any district doesn't meet that mark, then you have to collaborate with the state and you have to have a plan. So you have to have a plan to increase participation, and they will have somebody work with us on that plan. And that's what we do. We develop a plan to change the trajectory of the participation rate in collaboration with the state. It's not punitive in nature. The way they're saying it right now and the way it was written in all the webinars, et cetera, that I went to, it was more of, how can we support you in doing this? What are some ways that we can help you communicate with your, constituents as to why this is important? So, but it's an emotionally charged issue typically.
Well, we use this information or data to benefit the schools, right?
Yeah, I mean, really, we do look at like we looked at our scores, and we do well. So you're picking, right, a little bit, but you do need to pick, because I think Tony has always said, how do we go to the next level, right? So it does help us look at programming. It helps us look at, do we want to provide some after-school support for maybe our ENL students? Would that help put them in some language-rich environments to increase their language? If they're nice to slot their language, I think the work that Mike has done historically for years with the after-school clubs being very language-rich environments for kids, it definitely has to have an effect on language proficiency. We score very well on that. I don't ever want to lose that practice. So there's things like that we use the data for programming reasons. And we don't want to get test preppy in those situations, because we know language acquisition is best if they're using the language continuously around actively engaging with one another. So we have to create these spaces to get the language progression. So we use the data to inform what we're doing, but it's always like one data point, right? Every data point has affordances and limitations. So it gives us some feedback, and we look at that with our other sources of information too, and make decisions from there.
Yeah, several years ago, the state is trying to undo some of the things that caused the participation to drop, because state testing has been around since the early 2000s, and participation in state tests has never been an issue. It became an issue, in my opinion, when the participation and/or performance became linked to the evaluation system.
And you in your presentation haven't said that once.
Right. Because it's hard for us to predict why each individual would choose not to participate. So that's why I say, in my opinion, that's when we noticed the opt-out movement take place. That's when we noticed people scrutinizing the assessments. So the state has spent the last several years under the most recent commissioner, who's since left, trying to walk some of that stuff back. So they are no longer part of the evaluation system for teachers, the assessments. They went from 3 days of testing for ELA and math for grades 3 through 8 down to 2. They now have tests that are being written by teachers from across the state as opposed to a third-party company. So there is a letter that we send out annually to our 3 through 8 parents that talk about the changes that have occurred really since 2016, 2017 is when the changes started. But it can't hurt proactively, although we're showing growth in this area, to do some face-to-face communication as well. That's a good point.
Right. And they did, like Tony said, the commissioner did listen, reduce the testing days, you know, and try to decouple. So there was, when I went back and showed you this slide here, this is, that middle was parents really expressing why they didn't, what they weren't buying into the whole testing and what was you know, bothering them. And so she went around the state and listened, and they had groups that listened, and they made changes. The other thing I didn't talk about in here, because it's really going to be a funding issue, is for the ENL students. They're attempting to put the tests in their own language. So, you know, if it's a math test and I am a native speaker of Chinese, I'm not being assessed on my English, I'm being assessed on my mathematical knowledge, right, and competency. So can I get that test translated into my home language? That was another component that was changed, along with the less test days, decoupling from an APPR. And so those are all things that were a result.
Well, and one of the things you'll notice when you look at our participation data is it's stronger at grades 3 through 5, and as you get towards the middle school ages in 7th and 8th grade, it starts the participation starts to dwindle a little bit. And you know, when you look at the developmental nature of kids, you know, it becomes oh, my friend's not taking it, do I have to take it? You know, and a lot of times there's misinformation out there, so, you know, parents or guardians are willing to say, oh, if you don't have to take this, and, you know, you say nobody in your class is taking it, then sure, I'll write you that note that you don't have to take it. Because kids become more social once they get to 7th and 8th grade, and, you know, they interact more about those things. I think in 3rd grade there's less conversations amongst peers about who is participating and who's not. So it's something that, you know, we see that we're moving in the right direction, but it's certainly, we may want to be proactive in our communication before we end up on a plan or a list where we need a plan and the state is assisting us with it.
And we did, if you go to essa.nysed, there's like a one-page handout for board members, for parents. So one of the things that I did in the beginning of the year is I went to each building and presented the new changes to the faculty. And then they took those handouts for parents and they had them available at parent conferences. Not to talk about it, but just to show highlights. And it basically is highlights that we've reduced. We hear you, we reduce testing days. We're trying to develop tests that are culturally responsive. So they go through some of the accountability information that's relevant to parents on there. There's 8 points. And they did make those available. And they also, I think, are translated into, and don't quote me, I think it's 15 different languages. So like for our students that are not native speakers of English, they did bring those in multiple languages to parent conferences. So we did do that in the fall with the faculty, and they did, you know, parents were interested, the information was there.
And it's not a problem that we created, you know, it's not an Amherst unique, a problem unique to Amherst, but there's always hesitancy, I know, by myself and our administrative colleagues and our teachers even, to take a stand one way or another on the topic, because we realize how emotive it is and how some people feel strongly about it. So it's very difficult to find ourselves in that situation. So it's nice that the commissioner has moved in that direction, and I hope whoever succeeds her continues to look at those assessments and to make those improvements.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Dr. Shanahan. I think we should add that, if everyone's in agreement, as a follow-up action item to talk about communication. Dominic's suggestion was possibly with PTAs or PTSAs regarding ESSA and participation. I'm not sure if the board is in agreement with that or not.
Everyone like that idea?
Yeah, I think that fits in with something Lori had suggested too, that we reach out to the PTAs more often too.
Great.
Thank you.
That's all set. We will need a motion for new business items.
I'll make a motion for new business items E1, A through J, 2, A through D, 3, B through H.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I think we should note that the boosters gave a large gift to the school. Most of that $8,000 was a booster's gift under 1J. But that was pretty nice.
Is that the movie screen?
No, it wasn't actually. It was something else. Shoot, I can't think of what it was off the top of my head now. No, the windscreen came from the,
Oh, that was the class.
Class
That's right.
of 69?
Right.
yeah. No, it was actually just the sports boosters gave something to
Oh.
that. I can't remember off the top of my head.
I think Mrs. Brzezinski remembers. Mrs.
It's the
Brzezinski?
new sound system at the high school.
Ah, that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. In the gym?
No.
Or
Outside.
Turf, yeah.
We installed it over the summer.
Yeah.
The gym was a couple years ago, right?
Well, they're looking at one in the gym also.
High school?
Yeah.
Was it the middle school we got it in? Seems like we keep getting more sound systems.
Must have needed them.
They all need to be upgraded.
All right, well then, all those in favor of approving new business items E1, A through J, 2A through D, and 3B through H, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. You know our follow-up action item, was there any others besides communicating with the PTA? Okay. Then we will need a motion to convene to executive session.
I'll make a motion to convene to executive session to discuss matters regarding employment of a particular person and current and pending litigation.
We have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor of convening to executive session, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Everybody.